For more than a year now, I have questioned the PASD board about what is truth as it relates to the apparent capacity of social emotional learning, transformative SEL, university equity inclusion to embed propaganda, half-truths, and lies into the minds of PASD K-12 students. More recently, I have expressed concerns about what is truth as it relates to dangers of living by lies, or both by means of bureaucratically authorized and empowered practice. To help better understand the ways of governmental corruption, one resource is the seminal 1974 essay by Alexander Solzhenitsyn titled Live Not by Lie. On February the 12th, 1974, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was arrested by the Soviet Union. And on that same day, he released the text of Live Not by Lies. The very next day, he was exiled to the West. Solzhenitsyn equated lies with ideology, the illusion that human nature and society can be successfully reshaped to predetermined specifications. This ponder that Solzhenitsyn critique of the Marxist utopian impulse. As Soviet apparatchiks shoved him out the door, Alexander Solzhenitsyn's parting word to his fellow countrymen as individuals was to seriously refrain from cooperating with the lies of the Soviet Union's Marxist ideology, to stop going along so as to get along. Solzhenitsyn pointed out that even the timid can take one or more steps towards spiritual independence and away from living by lies. Another resource by which to better understand Soviet totalitarianism, its Marxist ideology, and its bureaucratic ways is a book written by Rod Dreher and published in 2020. It is also titled Live Not by Lies. This work addresses efforts by Marxism, neo-Marxism, here in America to carry out a cultural revolution by which to establish a tyranny of leftist ideological cliches throughout the institutions of this nation, including but not limited to K-12 government schooling. Other resources can be found in a number of works by James Lindsay. One of his works, Cynical Theories, How Activist Scholarship Made Everything About Race, Gender, and Identity, and Why This Harms Everyone, was published in 2020 and co-authored by Helen Pluckrose. One of the in-your-face lies the Marxist, neo-Marxist left has started to bully we the people into nodding to or living by can be found at the Pennsylvania Department of Education website. They cite where binary gender is characterized as a faulty concept that there are only two genders, male and female. For some, such effrontery may bring to mind the Hans Christian Andersen children's book, The Emperor's New Clothes. So is it possible that the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and other entities have provided a means by which to embed propaganda, half-truths, and lies into the school day through social emotional learning, transformative SEL, and diversity, equity, and inclusion so as to corrupt curriculum content and the critical thinking processes of K-12 students? Given changes in Pennsylvania K-12 government schooling following the ESSA, could today's ideological left now be inducing school districts across the Commonwealth to embrace a go along to get along strategy concerning a Marxist, neo-Marxist agenda? Since it appears that the PA Department of Education has no problem with living by an in-your-face lie on its very own website, how many other lies could it be asserting as truth in classrooms all over the Commonwealth? Given the reality of the current state of affairs within both the PASD and the Commonwealth, all this begs two questions. First, should we the people truly not be trusted with the facts about how PASD K-12 students are indeed being targeted to embrace living by lies? And second, is a PASD board MO of ambiguities and opacity the best strategy for the ideological left to deal with we the people and our questions about what certainly appears to be an agenda to train up PASD K-12 students to live by lies and in that process, so to speak, to love Big Brother? Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Quick.
Yes, I'd like to say something.
Mr. Guy?
I've been involved in education for 60 years. And one of the things that I learned is misleading individuals with one's terminology. Over the last 24 months, we've heard Marxism, neo-Marxism roots. We've been called communism. Last month, you introduced Joseph Stalin. And I'd be the first person to defend your right to speak. And you can say really whatever you want to say about it. However, I found your terminology hurtful. Growing up in Palmyra in 1950, some of my closest friends were German refugees brought here by Palmyra Church and Pastor Deacon. Many of them were East German, and I learned a lot from them, especially what communist dictatorship was, and how you're treated, and the loss of your rights. Then my first 2 years of teaching, I was down at Lansdowne, Alton. And again, a very traumatic experience there with Lithuanian refugees who had their homeland taken over by the Soviet Union and many of their family members in prison. And then teaching here in Palmyra with the Cuban refugees, and then the Vietnamese refugees, and then finally the Cambodian refugees. And again, I learned a lot of why those people were coming, and also what they were running away from. And when you throw terms out, the way you throw the terms out and accuse us of being that, I think that's very misleading and very hurtful to those individuals. Far too often I hear people talking about, the Holocaust, or, how the Nazis treated people. And the fact of the matter, if they had lived during that time, they'd be dead. Because, in fact, the Nazis wouldn't put up with it. Joseph Stalin didn't put up with it. So I think we have to be careful with our terminology and who we're hurting. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gus. On to curriculum.
Okay, we have a presentation on flexible instruction day. We also had Dr. Spagnola going over some of that information. We took a look at senior field trip and talking about approving that, and finally an athletic department sponsored overnight trip. Letter of agreement was talked about, and interest in teacher survey. And of course, I remember during that process talking about the fact many years ago, there were actually clubs and organizations that encourage people to get involved in education. And finally, inter-scholarship athletic eligibilities, talking about that possibility of enhancing our requirements, making them more rigorous. There was no public comment, and the meeting was over at 7:04. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We have the motion to approve the curriculum and instruction committee items as noted on the curriculum and instructional consent agenda. Dr. Spagnola or Dr. Kepler, do you have anything you'd like to add?
First, we need to get a second.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the table to approve the curriculum and instruction consent agenda. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Lieberher.
Everything as discussed in committee.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions regarding the consent agenda items? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mrs. Brady.
First, I know that staff and administration have been meeting minutes from April 27th of 2023. There were a few items on the agenda. The First item was board policy, second reading. The board reviewed the second reading of the board policies listed above in preparation of a motion this evening. The second item was the proposal for solicitor services. The board reviewed this proposal for solicitor services for 23-24 in preparation also of a motion this evening. The board reviewed an agreement for membership in the Technology Legal Consortium for 23-24, also in preparation of a motion this evening. There was a special education legal consortium that the board reviewed an agreement for membership in the special education legal consortium for the 23-24. Also in preparation of a motion this evening. We discussed the Western PSBA voting delegates. There was no public comment, and the meeting adjourned at 7:12 p.m. The next meeting of the Staffing and Administration Committee is scheduled for Thursday, May 11th, after the Finance Committee in the District Office Boardroom and via Zoom. So out of that, we would have quite a bit. And are these each individual items correct that I go through? All right. So we would have, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agreement with Boyer and Ritter CPA for audit services for the years ending June 30, 2024 and 2025 in the amount of $40,000 and $41,000 respectively.
There's a motion on the table to approve the Boyer and Ritter adopt audit proposal for years 2024 and 2025, as noted on the screen. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Heaney. Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right, moving on to the Act 93 agreement. I would like to make a motion to approve the Act 93 agreement from July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2027. And this appears to be a roll call vote.
There's a motion on the table to approve the Act 93 agreement for 2023 through 2027. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, call the roll.
Jeannie?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Guy?
Yes.
Gilligan?
Yes.
Alderman?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Koval?
Yes.
Everhart?
Yes.
Braden?
Yes.
9-0.
All right. And then we would have the memorandum of understanding. I would like to make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with the Palmyra Area Education Association to memorialize updated wage matrices for the 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025, and 2025 to 2026 school years. Also a roll call vote.
Motion on the table to approve the memorandum of understanding for the Palmyra Area Education Association, as noted on the screen and in the meeting minutes that will be as part of this. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Anybody have any discussion, or comments, or questions, or concerns on this? Call the roll.
Fisher?
Yes.
Guy?
Yes.
Gilligan?
Yes.
Alderman?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Koval?
Yes.
Everhart?
Yes.
Braden?
Yes.
Jeannie?
Yes.
9-0.
We would have the board policy second reading. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the second reading of the following board policies. Policy number 137, home education programs. Policy number 137.1, extracurricular participation by home education students. Policy number 137.2, participation in co-curricular activities and academic courses by home education students. And policy number 137.3, participation in career and technical education programs by home education students.
I have a motion on the table to approve the second reading of the board policies as noted. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Haldeman. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
I'm just saying no changes.
No, sorry, no changes.
Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion approved.
And then we would have the consent agenda. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the staffing and administration committee items as noted on the staffing and administration consent agenda.
There's a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda for the staffing administration committee. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Seaman. Any comments, questions, or concerns?
Dr. Pepper, did you have items you'd like to note on that part?
Happy to, we're thrilled with number one, the hiring of Rebecca Reno as school psychologist. I know 3 professional resignations. Thank those folks for their significant contributions to our school district. Some good folks there who are leaving to take on new roles elsewhere. Thank Mr. Myers, expressing his willingness to move from learning support to emotional support next year, stepping in for Mr. Mayo, because that position's a tough find. Some support staff hires, substitute teachers. Tonight you are approving the winter coach renewals. Based on contract, they have to be approved here in May. As we await the basketball interviews, we'll be bringing that staff forward after that's completed. Volunteer coach, the aforementioned school solicitor services, ed tech, and special ed legal full counsels. That's everything on consent.
Anybody have any comments or questions regarding the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Let's see, it's official.
It looks like your minutes from last week, is that correct?
There is no finance meeting the end of April.
So we're just going to move the minutes. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 23-24 proposed final general fund budget for public inspection in the amount of $64,424,776, with real estate mills of 17.7455. It's a roll call vote.
There's a motion to approve the proposed budget for public inspection, as noted on the screen, and then obviously in the meeting minutes. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Braden. Is there any comments, questions, or clarifications that anybody needs? As I'm sure most people probably don't understand, because I still don't understand the whole Mills thing. Mr. Prince, could you identify what that is in a percentage?
The numbers, 17.745 mils essentially divided by 1,000. So it's 1.745% of the assessed value of property.
So it would be in the, in our cap, where are we at as far as?
This is at the maximum is 5.3%.
So just so everybody understands, it's 5.3. Does anybody have any discussion or anything from this?
Just also clarify, this is approving.
Yeah, this is just for inspection. Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is just for inspection. It doesn't mean that the yes vote tonight means that this is what it is. It's just, again, here's where we have our preliminary discussion. From there, it would be for 30 days, right? So we're in June is when this vote would be.
June ships at 8 and final budget.
And Mr. John, do we just explain, because it was helpful for me to know, we started at the top and we can work our way down versus if we started lower, it's really.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
The better way to,
public to know.
yeah, the better way to go, I mean, everybody at least knows where I stand. I mean, I'm pretty much here, I'll stay here at this one, but this does not mean that everybody in the room or whatever is probably in favor of that. The best way to always go about it is to always say, I need $100, and then whittle down and say, okay, I thought I needed 100, but I'm really okay with giving you 80. So this, again, is the better way that you propose the budget, that you do everything. It's not to say that it will stay at this. It's not to say that it will go lower, but it's just, this is where you start. so that the discussion can happen. I'm sure we may or may not get more, involvement. I'll probably poke the bear when I say it, but tonight would have been a great night for people to come and give some public comment, but it is what it is at this point, so.
I can add too from an administrative seat, and I'm sure it's the same as you as board members. The timeline with the Commonwealth's budget does us no favors here.
Yes.
A lot of unknowns there, between what the governor's ask is, what will we get, somewhere in between what we budgeted and that. Has a big impact on local taxpayers when we don't know.
Well, there were some major things that we just approved, increased spending, so. Again, I know differences of opinion. I respect them, absolutely. I think I've said it plenty of times, so my eyes were completely opened in the last year and a half, 2 years of what the actual budget is, where money is, where money isn't. I definitely hear the, and I'm kind of saying mine because I honestly don't know if I will be at the next meeting. At least in person, so I at least want to say it in person versus on the computer. That I hear the idea of balancing a budget with savings. And I am all for that. I think that's great. The problem that I see with it from this perspective and from the business perspective is that's great when you can always add to your savings the next year. The problem that, as I understand school code, school law, taxes and stuff like that, please correct me if I'm wrong. Once we miss out on an opportunity to put in savings, the next year we're doubled down on that opportunity. So that's where I think that the unfortunate problem is. And then it comes to a referendum vote where you put it out for everybody, which I agree is a great idea, but it's not like normal household finances where this year we're going to spend a little bit more. Next year we'll buckle down, save because we're going to get better revenue or we'll do something like that. It's completely a state politic budget from the way I understand it. Please again tell me if I'm saying any different. But the way I see it, the way I've now come to understand and learn it is you're basically to the wall. There is nothing you can do to fix not allocating money this year and getting money this year. I'm not in favor necessarily of, it's not my first choice, but I just voted yes on teacher salaries increase, which I'm 100% on board with. Don't want anybody to misconstrue that. I just said to increase that for me personally. The other things that I said to increase it, I can't, because I'm speaking for myself, not for anybody else, but I cannot tell you spend, and then not pay the bill. So I'll take the heat for whatever that means, but that's where I'm at. Anybody else? Any comments or questions before we roll call? Call the roll.
Guy,
Yes.
Gilligan,
Yeah.
Alderman.
Yep.
Jones,
Yes.
Stovall,
Yes.
Beaverhurst,
Yes.
Braden,
Yes.
Cheney,
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
I know.
Moving on to the next finance motion, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Vista contract in the amount of $61,018 prorated through the end of the 22-23 school year.
Motion on the table to approve the Vista contract for $61,018 prorated through the end of the 2022-23 school year. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Fisher. I'm sorry, Mrs. Gilligan. I'm sorry, sir. Is any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Final motion from the finance department is a motion to approve the agreement of sale with Matthew Grams for the sale of the district-owned property that's located at 215 Crider Road, the amount of $6,400.
I have a motion to approve the agreement of sale to Matthew Grams for the sale of district-owned property in the amount of $6,400. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Seaman. Sorry. Anybody have any comments, questions about this? Just as clarification, Mr. Prince, could you just clarify the type of property, everything just for public, so that they don't think we're not selling it at good value or anything like that?
This is a very small sliver of land, unusable for building. In fact, we're selling it to one of the adjacent properties. For that, the district had an appraisal done of the land. This is the price that the appraisal came back at. So we are selling it at market value, which is required by school code.
Thank you. I just wanted to again clarify that it's of no use to the school district. There's some trying to get in, but obviously.
Chad, we're actually, it's a funny thing, we were paying for ourselves, we also pay the municipal tax, we pay tax.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we do, can't talk about
But for this. Any comments, questions, or concerns from anybody? Hearing none, seeing none, call the roll.
that. Again,
Yeah.
Alderman,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Vogel,
Yes.
Lieberher,
Yes.
Braden,
Yes.
Sheehan,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
got it. I know.
Thank you very much. Communications. Communications are on the board. They've been addressed as necessary for anybody that cares or whatever needs to see that. At this time, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment. First by Mrs. Fisher, second by Mrs. Gilligan. Hearing none, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned. Oh. I think we moved right into, curriculum, is it?
So we can go.
Oh, looking at the wrong. Yeah, here we go. There it's all about. Let's go there. We'll jump right in. Look at the wrong paper. Which this one I need to go to this one.
I'd love to take you up on the offer, but I think I'll be the building and grounds. We'll jump right in with the feasibility study update.
Thank you. We'll welcome our friends from RLPS, Chris Linky and Aaron Hoffman, who, an overview tonight that we're looking at about a 15-minute presentation. And then we've set aside some, 5-10 minutes for a Q&A and discussion. They're going to take us mainly through their building walkthroughs and our community survey results. Yeah, turn it over to you, Aaron.
Make me go first.
Closer to the scheme.
Yeah, it's because I'm shorter, right?
Well, yeah.
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 Wanna go?
Okay, so we've walked through all the buildings. We've had numerous meetings with the administration. We've had information back and forth with the principals. We have work to be done yet, but we're giving you a snapshot of where we are now.
Recording stopped.
Early results. And with our findings, whenever we can, we try to apply metrics to them to make it not emotional, but make it something more static that you can grab onto. So you're going to see a lot of what we're talking about tie back to the metrics tonight. But
Lots of data.
lots of data. Schedule, like, next slide. We're still early on in the process. Give you a heads up, we're early in May. So we're still in the discovery phase, where we're still collecting information. We're going to give you an update tonight, and then we will be back with you in August. Between now and August is when we start developing options to address your needs and some early solutions. But we'll work through a process August through October to narrow those options, to fine tune those options, and then sometime after that you'll be able to make a decision later after that. So there's lots to come, but we want to give you some information now, what we're seeing early on in our discovery.
Sure. So these are really the metrics that we use when we're looking at your buildings, your facilities, your learning environments. your land use, acreage, and those kind of things. So these are just your high level. We'll go through some of these in a little bit more detail so you can see what your comparison is to the guidelines or parameters that we see through the state and other school districts as well.
So, just go back a second. With these metrics, the two on the right and one on the bottom are the ones that we can use for existing buildings. If we get into and we're designing a new building and we have costs that we're trying to balance with it, those two would come into play at that point.
So this is more just standards and guidelines of what we see. So we look at how much building do you really have? How much of the building is actual learning space? So those really are the grossing factor. The rest is your walls, your bathrooms, your corridors, all of this stuff to support the learning spaces. What does that impact have? Average total square foot per student is a number that really helps us guide forward and making decisions on what you have versus what you need and what impacts that has on your program. The utilization factor really comes in at that secondary level because students move around so much. So you don't use every space 100% of the time. Elementary is a little different because kids are in that room a lot of the day. So at high school, we're looking at an 85% utilization is a good number. And then again, program square foot per student, got my per at the wrong spot, is really dependent on your programs and what you provide for your students. So if you have a really robust STEM or technology program, your square footage may be a little bit different on that program piece, just because you are more robust in certain areas. So we'll take this information and start applying it to what does that mean to Palmyra. One of the things that we look at are what are your capacities? What are your class sizes? So on the left-hand side, you'll see the grade breakdown that you have. The blue area is really the typical guidelines of what we see in schools. Orange is actually your data from April of this year. So your classroom sizes for kindergarten range from 18 to 20 students. You're right in that range. It also tells us you don't have that much capacity to expand. I'm going to put a caveat on kindergarten because you have half day. So we'll see that come up in the comments from the community survey. But as we move down first through third, you can get a little bit high, but you also have to weigh where is that breaking point of going to another class? What does that implication mean? Because that's potentially another teacher, another space. And what does that mean in each of the buildings? Fourth grade, again, you're about the same. You'll see middle school, you're pretty good. You're right into that mix. High school, you're on the high side of the numbers. And we know that that's part of your tight spot is your high school. So you'll see that as a common theme moving forward. These are just statistics of what you actually have. So you've got 104 acres in Palmyra. Total square footage is 677,000 plus. And then we also take that number against program area. So program area is what are your learning environments? What are the spaces that we actually use? So you're 388,000 plus on your actual learning environments.
That's good. Sorry, not to stop. Is the 104 including Ridge Road, or is that just?
It does not. That is your actual
Thank you.
acreage.
That's all I wanted.
Yep, that's
And
a
your
great,
buildings. Yeah.
that's a great clarification. Right. So leading right into that, one of the things that we looked at are PDE guidelines. So when we were looking at purchasing land or moving forward with those kind of things, these are the guidelines that we look at to move forward. So in an elementary, you always want to start with 10 acres and then 1 acre for every 100 students. Middle school is 20 acres, high school is 35 as your base, and then you add on to that. So you can see your numbers. Elementary, you're pretty good. Your middle school and high school, if you click, you'll see my little circle come up. You're quite significantly off on acreage, and I know you feel it. And that's why you have space at Ridge Road for athletics. The other challenge with this is your middle school, you're hitting your impervious. You have zero space to go with that. So what implications does that mean? Acreage at your high school is light as well. So that's why you feel the pinch on your campuses.
So just one quick math, high school, we should have, ideally, we'd be at 55 acres, we're at 40.
Yes.
Middle school, you're at 32 acres and we're at 8.
8.
Yes.
That hurts. That hurts.
They said Ridge Road, another site, it's not connected to the building, it's useful in its own way, but it's not like you're getting daytime educational advantage out of that space.
Do we know what Ridge Road is acreage wise, just off the top of your head?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but we have that information. I can pull that from when you were comparing
Yeah.
Lingle Avenue, Ridge Road and that.
Okay,
We have
thank you.
that.
Yeah.
We can definitely get that for you.
Can I ask where PDE guidelines actually come from?
It's through their plan time process. So when there was reimbursement, so when you were looking at building Lingle Avenue and you were going through the plan con reimbursement process, there's a plan con part C, and you have to compare 3 properties and their acreage and the pros and cons for that. And it goes through what your reimbursement would be on that, and the guidelines are in that plan con school code.
So it's financial and not actual need?
No, it goes by it's financial and need. So when you're looking at capacities of schools, so you also have to do with that plan concept, you have to do what you're building on there potentially, and how many students you would be housed on there.
It's a recommendation, it's not a requirement, it's just a recommendation, so you can compare where you are. And this is just confirming a lot of the stuff that you've already known about your school district.
Okay, it's not based on averages of other districts or anything.
No, it's their state guidelines.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the other piece, we look at all of your buildings, square footages, capacities, but we also look at that compared to your enrollment currently, which is in the blue, and then your future enrollment and your projections. So we took a look at the Pell projections. We also pulled PDE's enrollment projections. They do the same thing, and you can see they're fairly consistent. Pell's a little bit higher with the largest enrollment projection moving forward, but they are comparable and they're running at the same level. So that really gets you over to your enrollment now and that was April, correct?
Correct.
It's 3,541. And so if we look at Pell, their study was around 3,573.
And did those factor in any like future home building or anything?
The Pell study did, the whole front section of the study showed where movement was, where housing was coming in, what those implications are. They have a whole bunch of information on like how they calculate if it's a townhouse, how many students does that have? Absolutely.
Pell does a much deeper dive than PDE does
They
with
do.
their enrollment.
PDE does purely on live births.
When was the Pell study done?
So, I think a year ago.
Wary of last year, I believe.
Yeah, a little over a year ago.
So would it have factored in all the new homes that
Those developments that have broken ground are factored into that,
but not the ones that
not some of the new farms that just.
okay. So, and we paid for a Pell study?
Yes.
Okay. So try to be beneficial before, I mean, obviously we continue with this, but before we're done, we probably want another one of those.
At least I think we could have to talk about, I don't know how quickly we would want to turn that around. Is
Oh,
that-
no, I'm not saying like now, I'm just
Years from now,
obviously this is a few years, so that's all I was at.
Yeah. Because again, talking the action of buildings down the road.
Yeah, I meant before you finally did that, yeah. I meant a couple years down the road, not now, obviously.
Just a couple items of note. Enrollment and capacity aren't like linear. You know, enrollment does affect capacity, but even if you didn't have a change in enrollment, how special education is affecting your buildings
Yeah,
affects the capacity.
absolutely.
Future ready, how you use your buildings with the student-based education, that affects the capacity of your building. So whether this is going up or down may or may not affect capacity, all the other things that are going on. And that'll be part of the overall holistic study.
That's a perfect segue into our square foot per student and the guidelines. So typically we're going to see elementary 130 to 150 square foot per student. You're running anywhere between 108 and 126. And that is where Chris is talking about is when we're at 130 to 150 for elementary, you're seeing more robust special education spaces, more technology, robotics, more flexible learning spaces. So, and that carries through each one of them. The middle school, because that is your most recent project, at 150 to 170, you're at 148. So you're right on the edge. The biggest challenge for us is the average for the high school is 185 to 200 square foot per student. You're at 150. So you're significantly low. And that's again why we all feel that crunch at the high school. We know that you have programs that you want to provide or you are providing, but they don't have a home. They don't have a place to go. And that's where you're feeling that crunch. So these are just a little bit of a breakdown of what the impacts are at the elementary school. So counseling, support. The other one that we want to really draw attention to is the differentials between Lingle Avenue and Pine Street having a separated gym. The other two have a cafegimatorium, which is everything for everybody. So there's a little bit of inequity in your elementary school specifically to those kind of spaces. In the middle school, you have a little bit of pinch in the special education learning support. There have been some places where closet storage rooms have been turned into learning spaces. Not ideal, but you're making it work. So that's where that number is a little bit on the low side as well. The high school, it has some significant challenges. You've got, again, the special education learning support spaces, counseling centers. We do see in your elective courses that, especially when you get to the technology, the STEM, the robotics, you're very lacking on that side of things. Another piece that really, and it came out in community surveys, is your competition gym isn't as big as a lot of your neighboring school districts. I'm sure you know that as well. But that plays into the challenges of PE classes. And then just flexible learning environments, being able to have opportunities to use different size spaces to be able to teach in different ways.
So it's a little bit everywhere. You know, it's not one thing that is driving it. It's the whole building and number of different challenges you have to go out.
So to get a little bit into the community survey, we had 513 responses, which is really good. That is gives you a good breadth of what's going on in your district. There were 7 radio buttons and 15 questions. So we'll go through some of them. We're not going to hit all of them. We do go through a pretty significant number. But if you want to go to the first one. So really looking at all day kindergarten. I'm going to get my percentages. So we did high level looking at percentages, how many were really looking at important, very important, and it was about 61% of your responses were for full day kindergarten.
And currently, for background, we offer 3 full day sessions and I believe 10 sections of half day.
And with the radio buttons, you have these 5 choices to choose from.
Correct.
Just confirm that everyone's getting that.
So here we start to get into athletic facilities. We know that's always been a challenge in the district, and you're at 74% of your constituents and community said important or very important on athletic facilities, being able to use them outside of it. STEM programs, making sure that we're technology and engineering based, you're at 89%. So this is one of your highest focuses from your community that they really want to enhance that program and provide more.
And that theme continues into the open questions also.
Absolutely. And again, with robotics, we're at 65%. So STEM and robotics kind of tie together. A lot of people look at that as going forward, but really neutral. I mean, that's a telltale sign as well. Like people could potentially be saying that's important. It may not be at the top of my list, but it's still important.
They may not know what it is.
Exactly.
The impact of it.
Right. Again, technology to support students in learning, you're at 89%. For you're very important for that. Collaborative and flexible learning, that is really where we're seeing education go, and you're very fortunate your community recognizes that. You are at 78%, saying that that's important. They want to see that for their students. Capacity at the high school, this is not a shock to get 282 under very important. So we're at 82% we know your high school is the challenge, your community acknowledges it as.
Dr. Richardson filled out the survey 280 times.
Great, 282 different units.
So getting into more of the questions, this really, looking at the pie charts, kind of wants you to focus on academics. You see academics, academics and athletics, academics and arts. So if you look at it, academics is 65% of that chart. So it really shows that your community is putting importance on the academics, plus some other things, but that is the common theme throughout. One of the things on this one, what classes are important, what would you like to see? The real world skills, the life applications were important. It was only 28, but we see that as a common theme throughout the questions. You'll see that coming up in a few future ones. So it's kind of an underlying theme that we need to address trades, we need to address vocational, we need to address real life.
And it's a theme for you, but it's a theme we see across all districts. As real world application, how the students coming out of high school, how are they ready to participate in the next level right away?
And then the next one was providing financial literacy. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that at all, Dr. Spagnola, but
Yeah, we actually have a career and financial ed class that has a pretty robust curriculum with everything that our community was asking for, and they didn't realize, I guess we had it, or.
so it may be one of those things that, just needs to be out there a little bit more prominent in the community that, hey, we do provide this, give it a little bit more bang for the buck, right?
And we are revamping it this year, right, Dr. Richardson? They were, our teachers have been working hard at, but many of the things.
It's combined with driver's ed.
No, that's career ed. There's actually a CFL, career and financial lit class, that all of our students, we encourage them to take by 11th grade. Most of them take in 10th.
No.
11th grade,
Yeah.
11th grade.
Am I wrong, or is this something the legislature is looking at?
We would already meet with what Senator Gephardt's bill, we're already doing that.
Very few of our colleagues or of our surrounding districts are though, because we had a conversation about that.
If this passes, they have to do it.
Want to go to the next one? So middle school is more where this trades, vocational comes in as one of the higher pieces. But yet again, if you look at number 2 and number 3, it's financial literacy and STEM. So it's the technology. So that's. And then elementary, and I believe this was a little bit of a surprise, was bringing in Spanish, that foreign language, at the elementary level. That got a pretty significant number. And then we start looking at full day and half day kindergarten. Pretty significant number. If we look at full day or full day options, you're at 66% looking or wanting to look towards a full day kindergarten. And then this one gets into, make sure I get the right one. Is this the pre-K?
Yeah.
Yes. So this one again was pretty high on 64%. So I think that there may be phasing that you look at moving forward, looking at full day kindergarten and then potential of going down into pre-K. There's a lot of information out there, and I'm sure Dr. Spagnola and Dr. Kepler, you also can share information, but there's a lot of supporting information out there that the earlier you engage students in the learning environments, the easier it is if they get up through, and it's a little more cost effective as well if you're on the lower end.
There's a lot of discussion about this in general, and there's intermittent funding for that, different sources, but not consistent at a high level. If it gets to that high level, that's where you want to have an option of how you can phase into that, if that's what you need.
And then there were a few questions that were related to online and your Cougar Academy and moving that forward. This had some weight. It was about 35% said to, keep it going, maintain online academies and keeping your Cougar Academy program moving forward. And I jumped ahead.
It was a two-part question.
Two-part question, yes.
Keep
So,
it as is.
correct, and so there is a lot of support for keeping it as is, as opposed to making changes or getting rid of it. So keep doing what you're doing was the acknowledgement.
And that's consistent with the feedback that you heard with that program.
This became the athletics question is, should the feasibility study address athletics and what's the implications on that? And it was 52%. It's pretty significant. Like, we need to address athletics. That's got to be part of this feasibility
I
study.
like the vote, made 268.
There it is.
Yeah, as we go along, get that stadium done. So this was a little bit surprising because you're doing the natatorium currently. So that one was a little bit surprising, but it's not a huge number, but that it was part of the responses was interesting.
22 swimmers in the school.
Exactly. But it was overwhelming. I think we saw buck swing more times than not in different questions as well. So this is where it really hit home, but it was brought up in other areas as well. And then the other piece that we started to talk about was your elementaries and maintaining the elementary school. So it was more of do you want a community elementary school versus clustering grades? Overwhelmingly, it was to maintain. But we had some internal conversations with administration on this that you'll see in future questions coming up is we don't necessarily have community schools now because there are transfers happening. So a neighbor kid might not be going to the same school as the kid next door. And so should we really look at, does community schools make most sense? How do we get rid of those transfers, which is part of the questions coming forward. And so like, how long is too long, or what is the right amount of time on a school bus? 30 minutes is kind of that magic number. Anything below that was pretty good. You get a couple that are up in the 45 minutes, but anything from 30 minutes lower is about where we want to be. Overwhelmingly, they want to get rid of transfers. So I think that weighs into realignment and looking at your community schools for elementary. And then this really gives you an overview of everything needs to be addressed, our site circulation between buses, parent drop off, pickup. We actually coming in tonight, it was good to see baseball game going on, lacrosse, and where everyone is parked and how we came through campus to get here. So,
Parking lot.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And then you get to the parking lot and it's all empty. But we were also here at the end of the day just to see what it was like on the high school campus to just leave campus and parents going one way, buses going another, kids going another, and there was traffic pretty significantly across the back of the building, just waiting to get off of campus. So that's an intense amount of time. And so how do we make that easier? How does that circulation work better on site? Everybody's feeling it is basically what that comes down to. And so we also asked, what if anything, would be the one item. Oh, is it? Am I ahead on my steps? Oh, community use. And so one of the things on this one was really maintain what you do. Keep going. You're doing things correctly. There were some other comments thrown in, and by the way, we did not share, but you will get the entire report. So you'll get everybody's response, all 513, you'll be able to see all of those, but we pull out the ones that are pretty consistent, pretty regular in this. And then this one of the pieces that I thought played well to your district was, and you actually had it in your budget this evening, your staff and teacher retention play a big important role in who you are as Palmyra and making your school really work for you. Again, this is that teacher retention. This is where it'll become really important to kind of look at what responses, because there was a lot. It could be anywhere from address the stadium to bring robotics back on campus, because we know you're not on campus right now. to transfers of students on buses. And so this one really hit everything all at once.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, the question that precedes this one, these were open-ended.
They were,
No
that's
answers
correct.
to any of these,
Absolutely.
totally open-ended questions.
So sometimes when it's open-ended, it's hard to group the answers
Sure.
because they're so all-encompassing.
Yes.
So, but always space was one of your common themes throughout, and making sure that that was addressed. Class size really feeds into space as well. So what do we do with all of this information? So we start collecting all of this, and we've been working with the administrative team. Next steps are meeting with students, meeting with faculty, and educators. We're doing that before the end of school, but working on this must-have list, this must-have method, which is must-have, should have, could have, won't have. This list will keep growing, evolving. Things could shift as conversations evolve through the next couple of months. But these are really the high-level things that not only have come out of the community survey, but have come out of our building tours, understanding what's going on, coming from an administration. So we're pulling information from everywhere, and we're reviewing this information at every meeting. And some of the things have shifted, some have moved to different areas, but these are really the high level that we're looking at.
And then we'll take this, when we get to the option, we'll use this list to help evaluate the option and what is checking off the most boxes for you. And if there's an option that needs to be tweaked because it's missing out on one of these, we'll go back and redevelop those options. So when we talk about coming back to you in August through October is when we'll be showing you options and then measuring it against this measuring stick.
So then, as Chris had said, our next steps are really looking at the analysis of your building programs, what you need, where we need to go into the future, and then applying those options and the must-have, should-have lists moving forward.
Questions? Any questions?
So student, staff meetings over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Work over the summer, in the fall, start to engage some of the stakeholder groups. Folks through the survey, community members saying, me, let me participate. We've asked our LPS to try to take a lead on randomly selecting people, so we're not being the ones selecting everybody, because we have hundreds of people said, let me participate, so.
There was 168, if I remember correctly, that said, yes, that's a little too big for a group.
But it could be fun.
It would be fun either way.
168 options.
So I think next you'll see Chris and Aaron in the fall
Absolutely.
on next steps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Update on security and access to the turf.
So this is a carryover from, I guess, a couple of meetings. We had noted that we were having issues with access to the turf field, and providing, for allowing it to be open and useful, to students, and community members, more often. And so one of the things that we came up with was, hopefully, or we need to add cameras or other surveillance items out at the turf field. We trust everybody, and part of this openness is knowing it's going to be used. And we just want to be able to, if there's any damage, to be able to go get the person that did that, so we're not increasing our costs for there. So when I updated last time, we hadn't had the ability to have any vendors come in to provide any quotes. We have had a vendor come in to provide the quotes for the camera system and upgrades to there. This does include not only the cameras, but the fiber equipment necessary. There's no fiber at the turf field right now. We have to run from the maintenance shed over for all of those. That cost all in will be about $25,000 to run all that technology. That would include the cameras being installed and finishing that project. Another item we talked about is currently we just have lockable gates. We're using the old key method. One of the things that would help us, improve, or one of the problems we were trying to solve is we were giving out too many keys and not being able to get them back and having that be a hard tracking mechanism. We also have fob access. We have fob access to many of our buildings. That is much easier for us. We can hand somebody a fob, and they no longer should have access. We click a button on the computer, the fob doesn't work anymore, and everything's taken care of. So we're looking at adding that access as well to the stadium, as well as a turnstile gate that could be essentially locked or unlocked remotely. And once again, allow people to come use the facility during daytime when it's not being used by anybody else, and come and go as necessary for there. That all-in price for all of those things would be about $15,000. So we're looking at spending about $40,000 to most of that to upgrade the camera system, security system out at the turf field. Would then provide some other access items as well. Another item that's come out of this that we're actually believe work will start on May 30th is access to the building for community use that wants to meet in. Right now, if somebody wants, a booster club wants to meet, they'll ask us to use a classroom or something within the building. We'll do that. We have issues because of how tight our security is. We essentially have to have somebody go let people in the door. Usually a custodian or somebody that has other duties during the day or during the evening other than those. We're looking at, this work will start on May 30th. We have, our library has an outside access door. We're putting fob access at that access door. And then as the community groups, say the booster clubs would want to use that, whoever requested to use that facility would be given the fob. We go as you please on that day. And then we can make sure at the end of the day, in this case, the library would be properly locked up and all those things as custodians do go around the buildings at the end of the shift around 11 or 10:30, make sure all the doors are locked and those things are happening. So I'd like to be okay. This wasn't something that we budgeted. We do have, and we'll show during the finance committee meeting for our projections. We do have funds available to take care of this project. We would like to move forward to do that. So over the summer, hopefully by when we get the next school year, have this ready to roll.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. We'll go down. We kind of always go this way, Larry. Is that something?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if we have the funds set aside after.
Yeah, the one that's fine.
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
So you'll put that on the, for vote?
No, that would be just, I have to look through, to vet through the fiber contract, and it doesn't need bid or anything like that, so that may go back to approval, but after that, we'll move forward with purchasing those and see on expenses.
Okay.
Public comment, Mr. Queen? Nothing at all, Mr. DeSico? Okay. Yeah, that will conclude buildings and grounds. Thank you.
Moving into finance committee, first item of business is the Lebanon County CPC budget.
We are in, just went through our regular meeting within budget season, and the CPC budget will be on the agenda for next meeting for approval. The overall budget for the CPC is proposed to increase by about 2.6%. Our overall increase is already factored into the budget that was approved. Our district portion of that will increase by about 4.5% in total for our portion of the contributions that are needed for the CPC budget.
That's a question on that, and it's maybe more filling up, but you're talking about in the feasibility study, like the trades was a big thing. Would, if, and again, I'm just talking, if we ended up doing a high school or something like that, that had a better facility or other facilities, would that reduce our cost at CTC and possibly become a revenue generator from CTC using our facilities, or is that just not a?
You know,
So I can, there is a portion of the CPC that
Then we will just.
we're sponsored, we will not reduce that cost because we're a member district, and having those. However, there is, about $400,000 the cost in essentially the students we're sending there. And so that could fluctuate.
yeah, if we offer our own CTE programming, less students would go there, we'd be spending the money here than there.
Just interesting because. Thank you.
We do continue to look at offerings through Cougar Academy that may be geared more towards CPC and some trades and some certifications through like a sort of coding type, technology type program. We're in the very preliminary stages, Dr. Richardson and Mr. Rashin, and just looking to see kind of the need of what our kids are. I don't know that would do anything with seeds.
I was just curious.
It might provide some additional avenues here on campus.
Or treasure time.
This is a yearly item. Unfortunately on there, but.
Thank you. Absolutely. News story?
3 and 4 are items, special education placement contract that we would normally bring to students at their place. We're hoping next year, we're talking with, I think it was News Story and Vista, about approving essentially an overall contract that we wouldn't need to bring back each time we needed to place a student there. So hopefully in the future, we can deal with this once during the year and go on, but this is just our needs of placing students throughout the year and contracts that are required to follow on with that.
Do we utilize yellow creatures as well?
Yes, we do.
And I don't know if it's appropriate time, but what's the difference?
I would definitely have to refer to
That is the way. I'm just.
Yeah, there's different programs in each. News Story tends to be more in students with autism, although they do have some emotional support. Yellow Branches is more students with some emotional learning.
That's all I really need.
Yeah, so there's just different programs at multiple facilities.
Need more some of the actually states. Having to make sure that we're getting put in the door to make sure that we get the things that we need.
And that was part of the reason I was asking. It was spread out a little bit, but it seems to be on a short, necessity, yeah, okay, thank you.
Just add to, I think the programs will be different at both places, so we honestly look at the student and what program would best fit for their needs to. But like, I think Dr. Springall said it exactly, like more emotional support is usually more area of regions where News Story has our autism and some emotional support as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, the answers on that.
Okay. And how about our special education contracts?
Similar there that those are just placements for those students that have come up and do.
Any questions on those? Alrighty, and finally, the 22-23 budget projection.
So in projected expenses. So we went through, this is a normal process during the budget to go through during the year. As part of that building the next year, we developed the budget for the 22-23 school year. We started that process in October of 2021. And as that rolled through, so that information is, as best as we can. We need to make sure we're looking at how close we were to that pin, so that we can develop the next year's budget. So this process has been ongoing in concert with developing the budget. My assistant, Kevin Barlin, did a lot of work on these projections. But the main item for us here, health benefits, the 200, you can see, and we had talked about this a little bit before. We are already projecting to be about over $300,000 over budget. And this is an item that is fluctuating almost day by day. We are self-insured for our medical insurance. So whatever claims our employees get during a week, during a month, during a year, we pay those directly. We noted that, I noted that I looked at this information very closely in February to see where we are. That indicated to me in February that we were about $200,000 over budget, and unfortunately hasn't swung back from there. So this is an item that I anticipate could grow, that deficit or difference could grow by another $100,000, depending on how some claims come through June 30th. So it's an item that until June 30th, we're paying those bills. And as always, this is health insurance, so this is assuming normal life happens. All it takes is one catastrophic thing to one of our employees, and this cost is well dramatic. We do have very strong fund balance. We have money set aside specifically because we are self-insured to protect ourselves. So we have about $1.5 million in our fund balance, and we have stop loss insurance that kind of wraps around everything. So if we go into a year that's completely catastrophic, we spend our budget number, we also spend all of our fund balance, you're then wrapped around by stop loss insurance, which will pick up those additional dollars. So one of the main reasons that we need to have fund balance carved out for health insurance is to make sure that all of those stacks work together so that we're insulated or protected for some of those worst case scenarios. Once again, that is a number that could change. The 300 level really reflects some of our special ed placements, increased costs or increased budget there. We budget for the number of students that we have and believe that are coming. But we do not bake into the budget what I'll call ghost students. We're assuming we have to absorb 3 students that might move in. Once again, that is why we have fund balance, so that we can go through the school year knowing that whatever student comes to us and has those needs, we can meet those needs. We don't have to worry about, do we have budget dollars? Yes, we do, because we set up our process to have enough, hopefully, in our general fund budget. If not, we have a safety net. And those costs are reoccurring, but allows us to react in a future year. We needed to use fund balance. Well, we need to increase those costs in the next year to make sure we can attribute for those. As always, with any outplaced student, we're always hoping to work them back in to our classroom. Once again, we're always trying to make that decision as economically as possible to meet the needs of the student. The next item, which I was actually professional services, appears to be a little bit under budget. But once again, not very minimal in that aspect. The 500 level includes tuition to our charter schools and other transportation costs. We really saw a leveling off or a bit even a dip for our cyber school students. I think when we put the budget together, once again, almost a year ago, we were at that precipice of not really knowing. We had just come off of a couple of years of really expanded use of cyber charter schools. Because of a lot due to COVID, and as we worked away from that, we weren't quite sure where the students were going to be. Fortunately, some of those have swung back to us, which decreases our costs in the percentage line. Just jumping down to property, that's 700 there. Some of this was meeting additional needs that came up during the year, whether that be in the area of special ed or safety and security. Those are items that, this item in particular would be something that we would look at. If you remember, the state approved some money for safety and security, but that was after our budget was already passed. So we didn't account for any of those dollars, but when it came in, some of those were expended additionally, and some of that is reflected in there. That is not the total 307, but just an example of what makes up that number. So total expenditures are above budget by a little bit. Once again, going back to that healthcare portion of where those are. We've went through the projected revenue detail a couple of times, so I just put that number in total underneath that. So you can see, and as we knew, we passed our budget in mid-June. The state passed their budget, end of June, early July. And in that budget, there was essentially about $900,000 more than we had thought coming to us. The large reason that you're seeing that fund balance increase of 1.5, or projected, is because of that additional state money. We have spent some of that on items, on needs that have come up. But that is what we're projecting now. Once again, that number could fluctuate based on the healthcare. So if that continues to go up, that'll just shrink our projected increase in the fund balance. As I've talked about before, I would recommend, or our recommendation as we get through to the end of the year, would be to transfer any of that projected increase over the capital project fund. We planned for expenditures. The board allowed us to set aside about $250,000 each year that we transferred into the capital projects fund. But if you've been looking at that, that's a board report from the treasury report every month, you can see that we've about $300,000 of money in there that isn't spoken for. So there isn't a lot of money in there. We have well over $4 to $5 million worth of projects that we have pushed out in the future. Some of those we were assuming maybe we have to borrow funds for. Obviously, it's better if we can use money that we've already had coming in to do that. This is also a requirement of our policy. If you remember, we have the fund balance policy that requires it can be no more than 8% assigned and unassigned. So we'll need to transfer that money out to make sure that we're in line with our fund balance policy. But once again, we have more than enough need on the capital project side. Use those funds well for writing.
What's our assigned again? No, your number?
The assigned or us?
The assigned, is basically, the way I look at assigned is, it's there, but it's not really there.
Yeah, so the assigned is the assigned plus committed is $1.3 million for healthcare and $500,000 for pieces.
So 2 million is essentially of that 6 million is assigned.
Yeah.
So in theory, we really have like 4.2 million for that.
Right, so we're well under the state's requirements. However, our board policy is a little bit more stringent than that, and we're making sure we're.
But when we're talking about like just again, back to the whole budget discussion, and everything. We're talking about balancing a budget, we're $1 million, that we need to come up with $1 million. You get that for like 2 to 3 years, and then you have no money if you were to do that, right? I'm just trying to keep it simple so that everybody understands, like if we took the deficit, I think it was like 1.2, 1 point, whatever, is it 1.2?
Yeah, that is correct.
We're 1.2. If we took that out, then we'd essentially be at like 2.8.
Right.
And then next year, we'd be somewhere, we may not go to the 2.4, but we'd be somewhere closer to the 2 million range. But if you were to use fund balance, basically use the savings account to lighten load, soften load, I'm just trying to keep it simple. So
Right.
tell me if I'm wrong, 'cause I'm not trying to say that, but I'm just, that's the way I understand it. 2 to 3 years, there's no more money to fund balance with. And I don't know that there's a group in the country that would referendum the kind of tax increase you would have to compensate for that.
I believe you're correct, because if we would start using a significant amount of our fund balance to balance our budget, it's the start of a downward essential spiral, because we'll be able to live off that for a while, but we will be challenged with tough decisions.
I know the word's scary, but you're basically bankrupt in 3 years.
One of those being those, as I said before, we're able to make sure we meet student needs because we have that safety net. If that's not there, and unfortunately I've worked in schools where that has happened, you then have to make the financial decision. You're forced to do that because you have to make sure you're making payroll, have to make sure that you're paying your debt, and so everything else just has to come after that. And that's where hard decisions have to be made on a consistent basis, and with very little ways to pull yourself out of that hole. So that's what we're just trying to keep things moving in the right direction.
One other thing, this for me, right, just so I can put my head around it, but if we were to do that, right? In light of the RPLS or, you know, whatever, when clearly we don't have enough money for whatever project it is, but it's very clear that sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, there is another large scale project. If we, I mean, that's where rates, bond rates, loan rates, whatever, if we were to do what I'm not gonna say it's the popular decision or unpopular, but what someone suggested, how would that affect our borrowing and bonding of those projects that are inevitable? Again, maybe not in this board, you know, as we sit in this board, but in the future, in your professional opinion or whatever, what would that do to the district's negotiating abilities or anything else?
It greatly hampers any negotiating ability we have, because once again, you can only promise things that you know you're going to be able to garner in the next 2 years. The other thing is, you know, our interest rate for our bond is hugely dependent on the financial security of the district. So if you're in a financially insecure district, that may not be able to pay its bills year to year, maybe spending fund balance, you're guaranteeing yourself a higher interest rate. And interest rates, you know, in projects that we're talking about, constantly borrowing 70, 80, $90 million. That is significant money over a long period of time. So it would drastically hamper our ability to, once again, provide projects, because if you have to pay more interest, you're going to get less capital put into the building. And so you're going to pay the same cost and get smaller output from it. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we're financially secure year after year. And I guess I would put it this way: if there was any inkling or thought of here's how we should, or we want to use the fund balance, that has to come with a plan of how are we building that? How are we making sure that if we're taking that 1 year and using those funds, how are we making sure that that hole gets filled back in? And unfortunately for us, there's limited ability to do that. Usually that's reaching expenditures, which we talk about ad nauseum. We only have a limited ability to deal with that.
So essentially, we'd end up paying $200 for something that we should only pay $100 to do.
Another factor, if you're doing quick math, you're saying, Mike, you just shared with us that we're ending the year with a significant positive variance, yet we just voted on a proposed budget to raise taxes. As Mike said, this Commonwealth's budget came after your approved budget for the current school year and gave us almost $1 million more. You've heard this in the past, but not tonight. We're almost at a starting point of neutral for next year, because if you recall, our ESSER funding is going down. That stimulus money going away almost to the tune of $1 million. So our starting point is here, already using that Commonwealth's extra money for current year.
Well, that's why I asked about if we have unassigned for $4 million. I know the number, I understand the report number, but from what I know and when I look at, you know, personal stuff, I don't have 6.2. I have 4. I have 4.2. If I took the 1.2 out, I'm down to 3. And next year, I know I'm already 1.2. Hopefully, the state throws another $1 million, and it's whatever. I don't know that I want to gamble that way, because I know next year I can't get to compensate for anything here. So that's I'm just saying it out loud for me. I'm not trying to say, I'm just so that I can, wrap my head around where and why. And so at least anybody online or whatever can understand why my methodology of thinking. I'm not disagreeing with anybody else. I'm just telling you the way I understand it. So.
We understand.
Mr. Friends, so 9.8%, what is that percentage hinge off of the revenue?
It is the of next year, so it's the 23-24 expenditures that we have budgeted. It is 9.8% of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked about before that our fund balance policy is very tight. What would we need to do to change that? If there was board support to increase essentially what we could keep in our fund balance.
In answer to that, I'd be in support of that. We would just have to do a board policy. We would have to essentially, yeah, the readings that we go through everything, we just have to let that out.
And we could start from, PSBA has, very good policies, we're part of that network. And so I would start with their proposed, fund balance policy and kind of fill in the blank, the holes from there. To have that update, but yeah, same process, it would just take us, bring it forward for the first reading, second reading.
But regardless, you're capped at 8%, hence the need to move money to capital for those aforementioned projects.
Currently, correct.
Currently, that's it.
And but under state law, we're capped at 8%.
Well, but ours, even that's what we're pointing out, our board policy, state law is unassigned fund balance, can't be more than 8%.
Yes.
Our board policy says assigned plus unassigned.
That's why I asked about the assigned versus the unassigned, because I knew we had a more stringent.
So that $2 million essentially that's assigned would not be included.
Correct. And then this would bring it, obviously bring us back down in that state guideline.
It gives you appearance of having more money than you do.
So I don't know if this is the appropriate time and place, but can I ask if there's enough support to put changing this policy on the agenda?
Absolutely, Randy, absolutely. Mary Ann, you in support of that? Taylor? Alicia? Sue?
Yes.
When is that policy going to be?
There's no timeline, it's at the will of the board.
Would you be? Sue?
Yeah.
Well, we'll review.
In the other direction. Thank you, Randy.
Any other comments for the 2023 budget projections? We'll take us to public comment. Looks like, Mr. Clay, Mr. Mississippi, do you have anything?
You made a comment about getting the 4.2 down to 3. What reduced the 4.2 down to?
So what,
I must have.
no, it's good. Great, thank you. So what I was talking about is some opinion would be to go to a 0% tax increase, right? We don't need to take any more money. You've got plenty of money in the bank. Use the money that you already have to balance your budget. So right now, we have 6.2 in essentially our account, but 2 million of that is assigned. So really, we only have 4.2 to spend. So we,
I didn't hear.
yeah, so thank you, Mr. Police. So that's the way I understand it is, we're, right now, the 5.3 helps us cover, it essentially covers the 1.2 million that we need to balance our budget. So we're gonna increase to get that 1.2. Or what we could do rather than increase is just go hard zero and take the money from savings, quote unquote, which would drop it from 4.2 to 3. That's where I got to that. And then that's what I was saying is, if you follow that timeline, right, well then next year, it's not gonna be 1.2, but it's not gonna be 2.4, because, we kind of like to say it's double, but it's gonna be somewhere in the middle, right? So then you take your, somewhere 1.8, whatever, out of the 3, you're basically taking all of the money out of savings, but to Mr. Prince's point, you're never putting it back. There's no good mechanism to put it back.
I just didn't follow.
No, thank you for asking. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Prince.
That concludes finance team.
Half an hour, Mr. Davis.
First item on the agenda is board policy second reading.
So I'll take this one and for the first time, at least in recent history, I'm saying that there are changes. No changes to the policies that will move forward for second reading of the vote at the second May meeting. However, policy 251, we are taking off as our solicitor is asking us to review that more closely. They have something they feel they need to tweak regarding PSBA's recommendations. So I will be taking 251 off. I'm waiting for a small tweak from Stock and Leader, and we'll be bringing that back to you with that tweak. However, it starts back at first reading. So 212, 255, 607, and 906 would go forward as second reading with no changes since we reviewed them last. we'll table 251.
So we're still moving forward with deleting 250, is that 5,
Yes.
despite 251 not being read?
It's a good point. That's a great question. I'll table 255 as well and bring them both forward once we have the finalized 250. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other comments or questions on the board policies? No? All right, second item on the agenda, athletic department school sponsored overnight trip.
The annual football camp, this year Millersville University, July 14th to 16th, because it's an overnight student event, we bring it to you for approval.
The annual but not annual.
What's that?
The annual but not annual. Because it's no longer at LVC.
Correct, it's often been at LBC, yes.
It's coaches, I'm actually very happy with there now, obviously my kid plays football, and nothing against LVC, I think they're great, but the kids were more interested in taking their Xboxes and stuff, and I thought the football and everything, but this camp is, a lot of teams have kind of changed camps, I think this will be a great direction for the football program for years to come, just back to, it still does the bonding thing, but
And fully paid by the players and no school district costs.
like paint the face for the kids. Yeah.
Yes. All right, item number 3. Nurse agreement with East Coast University for 23-24.
This agreement simply allows us to have a school nursing student complete their, almost like I'll say their student teaching of school nursing here in our facilities. So pretty random, or pretty routine agreement. And she's actually one of our employees as a nurse assistant gaining her school nurse certification, so it's a win-win.
Any other comments on that? All right, item number 4. Again. You got PA voting delegate.
I'm on here as a reminder. Discuss the issue next year, we'll put it on your next agenda.
Right.
Or if you say table it, you don't need to discuss it further. We're happy to do that too.
In all honesty, does anybody want to do it?
Like I said before, never goes.
Anybody, you might as well just table it, you know, we can.
Good.
All right, and then we're on to public comment, Mr. and Mrs. Lee. No, and then. All right, that's all for the staffing and admin.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. The board will move into executive session, respects, and administrative and employee.